Now, after 7 years of brutal and bloody civil war in Syria, it's looking increasingly likely that President Assad is preparing for a huge military assault on the country's final rebel stronghold of Idlib. Nearly 3 million people are packed into the province. Some are violent jihadists, but many are refugees with nowhere else to go. Russia, Turkey and Iran are today holding crucial talks which may decide Idlib's fate. While Iran's President Hassan Rouhani is hosting the summit despite being a staunch backer of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The BBC's Tom Bateman is in Beirut and joins us live. Tom, we've got some live pictures from the airport in Tehran where we're expecting to see some more arrivals for this summit. What are the options?
Well, I think in short, this summit could decide the fate of many of the 3 million people that are in Idlib province. And the key point about Idlib province is that at least half of those people are from elsewhere in Syria. They've been displaced once already, fled there or transported there by the regime as President Assad's troops have taken bit by bit rebel-held parts of Syria. And as you say, there are few options left for them. They have very few places to go. Now, the key point to remember here, I think the key discussion is going to be between Presidents Putin of Russia and Erdogan of Turkey. Why is that? Well, they effectively back opposing sides when it comes to Idlib. The Russians back the Syrian regime. They have pledged to wipe out what they've called a hotbed of terrorists in Idlib province. Meanwhile, the Turks support opposition groups, a coalition of opposition groups there. The Turks have troops on the ground. But crucially, Idlib is controlled, much of it, by a jihadist alliance that was formerly aligned to al-Qaeda. So if the Turks and the Russians are unable to thrash out a deal, that is why many people fear that will then allow free rein to Russian-backed forces by President Assad to launch a full offensive in Idlib. And that is something that the UN has warned would lead to a humanitarian catastrophe.
Are there options for getting any of the civilians out?
There are few. I mean, humanitarian corridors has been one issue the UN has desperately been trying to do. But there are multiple problems. There are very few exit points. And even if there were, it would involve, in many cases, people going north towards what is, in effect, a Turkish-controlled area of Syria. Turkey does not want that to happen. They fear a push of civilians that would potentially add to the pressure to increase the numbers of refugees already inside Turkey. There's 3.5 to 4 million refugees inside Turkey. That's added huge political and economic pressure to the country, and President Erdogan desperately doesn't want that to happen. In terms of the political options, well, one pro-government Turkish newspaper is reporting that there could be some kind of deal to give safe passage to the 10,000 or so jihadist fighters into areas further north, Turkish-controlled areas, in return that they would give up their weapons to more moderate opposition groups. That remains to be seen, and certainly those jihadist groups have said they will fight back.
OK, Tom Bateman, thanks very much.
A major shift for the U.S. commitment to Syria. The State Department's new envoy to Syria says troops should remain until there is an enduring defeat of ISIS. That could take a long time, even though the president had suggested a more imminent pullout. I want to bring in CNN's Frederick Pleiken live from Damascus. There are dozens of American troops in and around Idlib province. We know maybe 2,000 in the country writ large.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Christine. The president, of course, originally saying that he wanted the U.S. out of Syria by the end of the year. Now it seems all of that has changed. The U.S. might be staying here indefinitely. Now, of course, the interesting thing is that there seem to be two missions in all this. One of them is the ultimate defeat of ISIS, which, as you said, could take a very long time, but then also making sure that Iran gets out of Syria. And that certainly is a very tall and very difficult task that could put the U.S. at odds, not just with the Assad regime, but then also, of course, with the Russians here as well, who see the Iranians as their partners. But of course, the Iranians and the Russians both know that the U.S. at any point in time, while it's taken a step back recently, has the firepower and the means to become a major player here in Syria very, very quickly once again. At the same time, Christine, you have a huge summit that's taking place today in Tehran, the capital of Iran, where the Russians, the Iranians, and the Turks are trying to hammer out some sort of agreement to prevent major bloodshed in that last enclave that's held by rebels here in northern Syria, Idlib province. Of course, there's a lot of concern on the part of the U.S. of about 3 million civilians who are still inside there. The Russians, for their part, are saying there's also a lot of hardline Islamists there that need to be defeated immediately. The Iranians were calling it a hotbed of terrorism. Just a quick note before I hand it back to you. We are hearing that there are airstrikes already on Idlib province this morning, Christine.
Okay, that's a really important detail. Thank you so much for that, and continue to work your sources, and we'll follow up on that if there are new developments. Thanks, Fred.
Breaking overnight, Defense Secretary James Mattis touching down in Afghanistan. He already met with Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani. Mattis will also see General Austin Miller, the new commander of Resolute Support and U.S. forces. He'll host a town hall with the troops. Coming up here.